Well, it's with enormous pleasure that I'd like to introduce my old friend, Mark Walford, who used to work some 40 years ago. We worked together, and it's wonderful that we've come a full cycle, and Mark is now, has created this wonderful vineyard, Soula, together with Roy Richards. And this evening, we have Mark and his winemaker and estate manager, Wendy Paillé, who we have yet to have the pleasure of actually meeting. But I'm going to hand over to Mark and Wendy, because they can tell us all about Soula. We've got a glass of Soula in front of us, and all I can say, it is absolutely delicious.
It's beautiful, showing beautifully.
So
16.
Over to you, Wendy and Mark.
Wendy, come on, you go ahead. You run the place. You're going to speak first.
Well, I do think it's appropriate that Mark starts, because he has been here. He was the founder of Soula in 2001. I've jumped aboard from 2016. So, Mark, if you would like to perhaps present the beginning.
Yeah, it'd be great to the story. And I'm just going to jump in also, just say, if anyone's got any questions, as always, feel free to ask them to Mark and Wendy via the chat function. And I'm going to ask one question, actually, just to begin with the start of your story, Mark. Can you just explain why it's La Soula, not La Soula, as well, just to begin with as well, and the whole story?
Soula is a Catalan word, and it means either the sun or the sunny slope. And without digressing from the very start, when we were working in India many years ago, because I was convinced India was a market just waiting to be opened, it still is, I was talking to an immensely educated Indian, and I said to him, isn't it strange that there should be La Soula, the most famous wine in India, and our Soula? And he said, not a bit. He said, because the roots of Hindi and Catalan are both in Sanskrit, and the Sanskrit word for the sun is Soula. And our Soula vineyard is named after a particularly sunny, southerly inclined slope, which the locals had always known as the Soula. And so we picked it as our name. But Soula originated with Gerard Goby, who became a great friend in our wine importing days. And not only did we become great friends, but we also learnt the potential of the Roussillon. And he said to us one day, making wine in the Roussillon is all very well, but I'm convinced that if you went high up into the mountains, you would have all the advantages of the plains of Soula, together with the freshness that comes from high altitude, because Soula's USP, so to speak, is the difference between the temperature during the day and the temperature at night. So our wines, even in the hottest years, and we still have 2003s, 2005s, 2009s that are fresh as a daisy. The great thing about Soula is that it can be boiling hot during the day, but it's still freezing cold at night. So our grapes ripen, but they don't over ripen, which I very much hope Wendy would agree.
I definitely do. So we are situated on the plateau of the Fenouillet mountain in the south of France, on the Roussillon side. So we are a big city. Close to us is Perpignan, just to situate you. We're about 40 minutes drive from Perpignan, about 2.5 hours from Toulouse and 2.5 hours from Barcelona. We are surrounded by mountains. In the south, we have the Pyrenees, we have the Albert, we are on the Fenouillet, and then to our north, we have the Corbière. And so this is all very important, talking about the mountain range, because it creates a huge wind influence. So even though we have altitude and we are on the plateau, we have a very extreme climate, very windy, very dry. Summers can be very hot, which saves us, as Mark said, are the cool evenings. We can have frost. We've had some snow this year already, which is quite rare. All of this, you know, we're definitely seeing the effects of global warming. I think it's more real to see this in agriculture. but our terroir is absolutely amazing. And then of course we're on granite soils on the plateau.
So we're just actually bringing out some pictures here, Wendy. That was you reminded me that to do that. There we go. Got some lovely photos here of Soula. So that kind of really captures where you were saying about. I think we all want to be transported down to you. Seeing it's your photos which have caused me the most pain, I think, in the best sense during lockdowns.
It's absolute pleasure to work, to be in the vineyards. We're quite sparse. We're not, our estate is now 20 hectares, of which we have around 14 different plots, and they're not all together, which really saves us from hail or the extreme climate. This is a great example of what happened. This was this year, very sunny days, but what you don't see is that the wind is blowing. And so this icy, chilly Tramontane coming from the west will go into every single crevice or every single opening in your neck, and it is ice cold. But we have these beautiful days, so it's all forgiven on the outside pruning.
So what's this one of, Lucia? Can you explain about this, Wendy?
So on the left, this is my office view. It's absolutely painful to go to work every day. This is the mountain that we're seeing opposite it's called the Canigou. This is a sacred mountain of the Catalan. It's not the highest. It's at, I believe, 2,800 meters. I believe it's either the second or the third highest. Do you know, Mark?
I don't. It's a high. I understand it's the highest in the Eastern Pyrenees.
Right.
I don't know how high.
So yeah, so that's my office view.
Very nice.
Awful. Wow.
And yes, please tell us about this.
So our logo is the bee. As you'll see on our bottles, we have a bee. And we do now have hives. We do have hives to contribute to the ecosystem. So we know that bees are being threatened. We know the results of not having bees. And so we decided to introduce bees as not a product that we'd sell, but as to encourage more of the ecosystem. And of course, because it is our logo. So we have between 10 and 15 hives, only a few. We don't buy colonies, we trap them. So these are all wild bees that we trap. We're not at risk of pesticides because as you saw in the photos before, we're actually surrounded by the garrigue and all our neighbors are organic. But we do have a problem of the Asian wasp. So
Hornet.
the Asian hornet, thank you.
Right.
And it's absolutely brutal to see how these Asian hornets will flutter around the entrance of the hive, and as soon as a bee comes out, it'll jump on it, take it up into higher into a tree, like chop off its head,
God.
and then it'll fly down and wait for the next. It's absolutely, it's horrific. It's so aggressive. And so bees are starting to learn to work together. They get outside at the entrance of the hive and they vibrate, and this helps a bit, and it scares off the Asian hornet, but it's still a problem. So.
And Wendy, we've got a question here. I'm just asking how you actually capture bees.
We trap them with
how you trap them and
with
get
pheromones.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And also, can you explain why there's a bee on the label?
Mark.
I can say that because when we first started, we had cellar space dotted around the village of Saint-Martin, and the house where we based ourselves had over the front door a cipher of a bee. And I asked Gerard Goby why this should be, and he said, well, the principle was in the 19th century, in the very early days of insurance, that an insurance company would indicate that a house was covered by putting its cipher above the door, which meant that when, supposing the house caught fire, the fire brigade would arrive, they would see the sign of the insurance company, which in our case happened to be a bee. But in England, that could have been the Sun Alliance. There are lots of old buildings in England with a sun over their front door, or the Star, for instance. They would see that there was a bee over the front door. They would know that they would be therefore paid for their work, and they could proceed to put out the fire. If they didn't see anything, they probably turned around and went home. But anyway, we took the bee, and because it seemed like it's a rather nice design, and it seemed very suitable for what we were doing, and it's been our emblem ever since.
Oh, lovely.
And we have a question from Donald from La Trompette. He's asked the early wines were labelled as Gobi La Soula, were they?
Yes. Well, Gerard was always our inspiration. He got us going. It was his idea. But as time's gone by, they wanted their the identity of their vineyard to be separate from ours, and we felt that we could stand on our own feet. So I can't remember when exactly. It was not so much a conscious decision. It just seemed to be logical that we would no longer have Gobi on the labels. But Gerard remains our godfather, a great friend. He's always there for advice. He and his wife, Ghislaine, have a wonderful table, and we always see them when we're down there. But he has no direct involvement in what we do, but he was nonetheless our inspiration.
Fantastic. And can you explain a bit about biodynamics? I know we were talking about this the other day, Wendy, but just explaining, I know everyone knows what biodynamics is, but I just thought the explanation you gave the other day was so brilliant, and just highlighting why you're biodynamic and kind of going above and beyond organic as well.
Okay, so I'll try not to be very militant because I very much believe in organic practices. So I think that's the minimum. If you're a farmer, whether it is, whether you're growing flowers, if you're a farmer, you can see what you're doing to the earth. And so it's just a minimum to have an organic practice because of the life and what we're contributing. Biodynamics is a choice. We do biodynamics because even though there's not yet proof, but we are linked to our environment. We know the influence of the moon. So why would there not be? Why we are in the solar system? So we're all together. There is a influence of the planets on our planet. So biodynamic, it is a choice. We find, being certified since 2008, biodynamics, we find a balance in our soils together with working in organics, but also the preparations that we use. I do believe that the first planet to respect is Earth. So I will always, and a lot of biodynamics is observing what your vineyard needs and not to follow a recipe, which Soula is absolutely known for not following recipes with our blends. And but you have to see what your vineyard needs. If it's suffering, you can add extra plants like ortie, stinging nettles. If it's a very wet or humid year, horsetail is good. So everything, it just depends on what you need. And that's what I feel that biodynamics means to La Soula.
It was interesting when you were saying the other day as well that for biodynamics, I've always only thought about it with wine, which is quite naive, I guess. But you were saying how just the amount of other industries, obviously, naturally, that have follow the biodynamic principles as well.
Sure.
A very elementary example is that the ancients always noticed that when they were fining, they were much better to fine after a particular moon.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the lune, I think it's called the lune rousse, is followed by high atmospheric pressure. Now, if you're fining, in other words, you're using, you're trying to drive the suspension down to the bottom of a barrel, it's far more effective when the atmospheric pressure is high than when the atmospheric pressure is low. So that's an example of the influence of the stars, the moon, and the planets on viticulture and winemaking.
Fantastic. And could you walk us through your different wines as well, please? Maybe starting with Le Soula and then the Dragoons.
So we make 67 different wines at Le Soula. We have 20 hectares, of which we have 8 white varietals and 3 red varietals that we work with. Our Soula is our top blend. We always choose the best grapes. When we harvest, we vinify and we age separately. And when we blend, we take the best of the best to get, regardless of the volume, we want a wine that's representative of our terroir, of our region. And usually it goes for 2 years of oak aging. So between 20 and 24 months of oak aging. So we do a Soula white and a Soula red, and these are released when they are ready to be drunk. So we are currently enjoying the 2016 on the white.
And people are commenting here quite how gorgeous it is and how it's shown so beautifully, Wendy.
This photo? Of the
oh, no, the wine 16.
Yeah, in the chat, yeah.
So, and for example, so the 2016 was ready before the 2015. So we jumped from 2014 to 2016. So that's, we always try and have the Soula available when it's ready to be drunk. On the red, we're doing the 2014 and the 2018 because they're both, the 2014 is really notes of elegance, slightly cherries, and the 2018 is just round and ready to be consumed. And I think it's going to be interesting for a lot of people to enjoy. So that's Soula white and Soula red. And then we have Trigon white and Trigon red. Now, these two wines are blended with different vintages as well as varietals. So as I said, with the Soula, we'll choose the best of the best. If it doesn't make the cut for our top wine, we'll start blending for Trigon. And sometimes the wine's not ready. And so it will go in additional aging and it will be called up for the next year of blending of Trigon. So when you see a Trigon number 19, it's a number, it's not the vintage. And I believe the number 19, for example, on the red, there's more 2018 than there is 2019 in the blend.
And we have a question from Stephen Cooper. He's asked, interested to hear about the choices around the changing cepage year on year. 2016 had quite a bit of Sauvignon Blanc. From memory, there's a bit more Chardonnay in the past.
Not Chardonnay. We have a very small bit of Chardonnay, and before we fenced up, it was always donated to the wild boar. So a real problem that we have up in our area. Never a recipe. So blending, it's pretty intense. We spend a good day working with the different lots that are selected, and we taste, and with the help of Roy and Mark, myself and Julian, my colleague, will get together and blend. And we found that Le Soula white generally does the best with the majority of Sauvignon Blanc. Once again, not a recipe. It changes year to year, but a Sauvignon Blanc on granite soil is absolutely superb.
And there's a few more questions popping up about this as well here, Wendy. Just Andrea Fassam from La Petite Maison is just asking which vintages you suggest drinking now from red and white. And I'm going to throw in the Maceration as well. I know that's a blend also, but which ones do you think are drinking now?
So like I said, 2016 white, but if you can get your hands on the 2011, the 2009, the 2005, the 2002, 2001, they're all drinking great. If that helps. On red, Mark, would you like to answer the reds? Because you do more reds than I do.
Well, I always say rather glibly that we've not yet made a wine that's fallen off its perch. So you can drink any vintage of Soula that you can find. 2003, one of the hottest years in living memory, Soula managed to produce not just a red, but also a white with freshness, and they're both still drinking. 2004 had lovely balance. 2005 is very structured. The white is quite rich, but is developing character with every passing year. Quite frankly, any vintage of Soula should give you pleasure. But biodynamic wines are a law unto themselves, and they do have their moods. But generally speaking, a bottle of Soula, given enough aeration, will sort itself out and will become fresher the more time it's open. And that applies even to our very oldest vintages.
You say that for Macération as well, and if you don't mind telling us a bit about the Macération also, but just how if you drink it over the next couple of days, I mean, it just gets better and better.
I think
Macération can be open for weeks.
Yeah.
And I think Tamlin Curran put the nail on the head when she said it's a shapeshifter. The 2016 white, it develops, it changes, it becomes more mineral, and then it's more floral, and just as time and oxygen, and it's ready right away when you open, but with decanting, it changes.
And we've got another question. Saying we picked up a case of Le Soula White 2012 from auction last year and have since introduced it to our range. Is there anything significant regarding that vintage or blend that you could give us an extra insight?
Mark?
I'm thinking, and I think 2012 was a fairly classic year.
Yeah.
The white was better balanced than the red. The red was quite lean, but very often the leaner red years make for very good white years.
Yeah.
So I think I would expect the white to be drinking very nicely, but I can't remember anything specifically.
And there's a couple more questions about vintages just to link in with. So I'm hearing that La Petite Maison has 2009 red now, and they're saying it's brilliant. 2018 has often been compared to 2003. How do they compare for you?
2018.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, but it's a much more balanced year. 2018. 2003 was the hottest of hot years, and one of the things that I personally am proudest of is the fact that you can open a bottle of 2003 Soula White, and the wine still has ripe fruit but very, very pronounced freshness, and it shows no sign of tiring. Whereas a great many white 2003s from other vineyards and other countries have long since turned up their toes. But 2018, I mean, I love 2018 as a vintage. Because I think it's super balanced.
All-female team that year.
I beg your pardon?
It was an all-female team making the wine that year.
That's right. That's right. Men were not allowed in the cave.
Imagine the Beyonce songs kicking off.
We get our revenge from years.
Totally.
If I may also just add for the 2003 and 2018, the 2003 in memory was 50% Grenache Noir and 50% Cabernet Sauvignon. These are really big grapes with a very hot year, where the 2018, even though of course the Roussillon is hot, we have Carignan and Syrah, which are really old vine Carignan. So that's also a big difference on the two vintages.
We have another question from Merlin Ramos. He's asked, will the Soula Rosé be every year? Only 18 and 19 so far, if I'm not wrong.
Well, there's a story behind the rosé. I've always wanted to have, I'm not a huge rosé drinker because it's just the connotation of having a rosé with ice blocks next to the swimming pool just drives me crazy. So I decided that I was going to make a rosé, and it's pink, and I showed it to Mark, and he looked at it and his eyes went all big, and he said, "Goodness me, who's going to drink that?" So I do very little. I do between 750 and 1,000 bottles a year. I did do 2020. I did make some, and it was bottled last week. 1,000 bottles.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, look forward. I haven't ever tried the rose. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't think we have. Oh, no, actually, did
I
we?
think maybe in Angers.
Yeah.
The first
Were you
and
showing
only
in
time
Angers?
we met, actually, just before the craziness started.
It's a direct press of Syrah, so it's really pink. And then I do pass it in oak, in 500 liter, in demi-wheat, 500 liter neutral oak barrels to have a quicker evolution. And it gets bottled early spring, and it's got a it's quite spicy, but it's also very like squashed strawberry character.
And just going back to the Macération again for a second. Sorry, it's just because I'm drinking it and I really love this wine. I think for it's an orange wine that pleases everyone. I've been through phases where I was kind of trying to get to grips with it, but yours is just so beautiful. And can you tell us some pairings? Was a question that came up. Some different pairings that you'd recommend to go with the Macération.
So the Macération, the Soula Macération right now, it's a number 19. So it's a blend of 19, 18, 17, 16, and 14. It's a balance, which is exactly what I was looking for when I blended this, was to have a wine that's harmony, that works together. Because so many times we have orange wines that's too tannic or too aromatic, high in alcohol. And so I really wanted I want the Macération to remain a wine. That's it. It's nothing else. We are making, we winemakers. So that was my aim. I was looking for something that's balanced, that still drinks as a wine and not. So our maceration is quite unique. It's very smooth, it's very elegant, and it has spices. And once again, this is also a shift shaper. It changes. I like to pair spicy foods with it. I like tagines.
Do that, yeah.
A little lightly spicy, maybe some prunes in to give a little bit of, catch out the sweetness. One of my biggest fans with our Macération is an old Comté, like a 36-month-old Comté with little salt crystals in. Also, it does really well with charcuterie, some, some saucisson and an aperitif. Mark, do you have a preference?
I've had a few orange wines actually, paired to us at the sommelier Andras at Tamarind, which is a sort of famous Indian restaurant in London, and they do actually pair really nicely together.
Yeah, beautiful.
We've got another question from our colleague Shana, kind of extending to what you've been saying. What inspired you to make the Macération, and how has this evolved and how you make it?
So we work with Vermentino and Macabre making the Macération. Majority of our reds, in fact, 99% of our reds is whole cluster fermentation or carbonic maceration, and so is our orange wine. I think our winemaking has changed where I'm much more hands-on with the orange wine. Once it's in the maceration, I will taste 3 times a day. The first thing in the morning, I'll go straight to my orange tank, taste it before lunch, after lunch, to see how the flavors develop. And I'll press as soon as I think it's ready. So usually it's about a 10 to 15 day maceration. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it goes to 3 weeks. But the secret is long aging. That's the secret.
Okay.
We have a message from Sean Evans. As today we are remembering Stephen Paillé, I tasted with him a few times and asked him which natty wines he tasted. Top of the list he mentioned was Le Soula.
Great chap, and we'll miss him.
Wow.
Stephen's
Great.
Yeah, raising a
Yeah,
glass
great
to him
guy,
today. And another question here from Andrea Fassan, just saying, Wendy, what was your experience before joining Le Soula, and what did Le Soula Terroir teach you?
I worked in the Loire before at a company called Paillé, and so very interesting terroir, slate. We were on slate and quartz, and we made 20 different wines with one grape varietal, Chenin. The Roussillon and Le Soula specifically is so much more satisfying. Personally, my what I've learned is the blend. We're doing these complex wines, complex blends with an amazing soil. I've never worked with granite. It's absolutely fantastic, fascinating. It's acidic soil. It gives minerality. It's a white soil, so it reflects the heat. And just the view, it's just wonderful. And not to mention, I've got the best buses in the world.
Depends on the moment.
Not biased at all, Wendy. To be fair, we agree.
It's on record now.
And I keep going back to the Macération, but a lot of people are saying how it's their favorite orange wine, from Victor at Chez Bruce, Melania Fat Duck, and then we've got a question here from Marcel at the Wine Society.
I'm hoping it will go well with a cunning plate of anchovies that I have lined up for a little later. Good to see you
Yes.
both. I remember
Very
showing
good idea.
Stevens Paillé many years ago.
Lots of glasses being rated to Stevens Paillé.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how old are your vines then as well? Looking at this next picture, and the very first one we saw, could you tell us the rough age of the vines?
So we have Macabeu dating from 1900. We have some Carignan from 1919. Here we at this parcel is called La Chapelle. It's I believe it was planted in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken. This is very typical goblet pruning that we do for Carignan, for Macabeu, because the leaves are pretty low, so we don't need to trellis. The rest of the vines, like Vermentino, Sauvignon Blanc, they all get trellised because of the wind. And then we are restructuring the vineyards at the moment. Unfortunately, the vines from 1900, as they are old, we do lose every year, and it's absolutely impossible to do a co-plantation in them, because these grandfathers have been here for years and years. Their roots are everywhere, and you're going to introduce a young vine and the survival rate is absolutely zero. So we have to, unfortunately, think about taking them out. So I've been doing a lot of planting since 2016. We're trying to plant every year. And once these start producing, which takes around 5 years for us, then I will have to make the very hard decision of ripping out the old ones. Unfortunately.
Oh, that must,
Yeah.
must be so tough.
Yeah.
And there's a question here, two questions here. One more for Marcel Williams, asking from Bruce at Chez Bruce, what's cunning about anchovies? And he also asks you, Wendy, what proportion are red wines and white wines?
We're about half in our vineyard. Yep.
And you mentioned Vermentino and Macabeo for the Macération. Do you feel more aromatic varieties are helpful for making skin contact wines?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's very exciting to work with Vermentino. Plus, when we pick the grapes for the Macération, we select the best looking grapes. These are just, they golden in color, the sun is shining on them, and we pick them. There's not one, they're just pure round grapes, and this is what goes into the tank that we macerate. So yes, it's very exciting to work with Vermentino. It definitely gives it opulent aromas on the orange wine.
And you're kind of, I'm going to ask this question, Wendy, but we spoke about what to do in your region. Often we're talking very much about wines, but if everyone heads down your way to come and spend some time, because truly, I've got Soula at the top of my list for where I'd like to head, to be honest with you. Can you tell us all the things you were saying about the other day, and especially that restaurant also, and the different things that you can get up to in your region?
Well, we can start with like a fitness camp. I can give you all. Like,
you trying to say something?
You can help the vineyards. We can start with that. Our region is well, because it's so mountainous. There's so much to do, whether it's rock climbing or canyoning. There's whitewater rafting. There's something called the Via Ferrata, which is a cable between mountains that you cross over. There's the history of our region, especially in the mountains opposite in the Corbière. We have the Chateau Cathar, which is absolutely fantastic to see and to imagine what happened back in the day. And hopefully soon we'll be out of COVID, and like Spain's just a sparrow's fart away. It's just a short drive away. The beach is maybe an hour. So yeah, there's tons to do.
And the restaurant that you mentioned, I've got to note it down. It was.
So it's called Riberac. It's one of my favorites. It's the old Cave Cooperative in Belasta, which is one of these villages around our area. And they changed it into a restaurant and into a hotel, and just delicious food. There's a natural swimming pool, so even though it's green and there's frogs, you see frogs, and it's gorgeous. It's just a relaxed atmosphere, and
a great wine list, you said.
Great wine list, absolutely.
And we have a question. Is the domain surrounded by other winemakers or growers, or is it an isolated domain? The scenery does not look very friendly.
Wine friendly.
Vine friendly.
Vine friendly, sorry.
Oh, well, that's the thing, is like, as Gérard Gobier and Marc discovered, even though it's probably not the easiest topography to work, it's amazing. What it gives is absolutely amazing texture and minerality. So like I said, it's granite. We don't have a lot of topsoil. It's about 40 centimeters of decomposed granite, and then we go straight onto the mother rock, which is great for the vines because they really work hard to get into finding the water. We do have two other neighbors. We have Eric Laguerre. He is also in the village of Saint-Martin, and the old Domaine Salvat has now been acquired by Domaine Lafage. So we do have two other neighbors up in the hills. But as you can see, we are surrounded by the Garrigue. It's definitely wild boar scene here.
Asterix and Obelix.
And did you say that the wild boar, I didn't realize this, you said that the only reason they go for the grapes is because they're thirsty rather than they're wanting the sugar?
Well, yes, because if they were going for the sugar, they would wait for it to be ripe. But as soon as we have maybe nine bricks, they will go into the vineyard and they just munch onto the grapes and suck off the juice, and then just keep going. Like I said, the Roussillon has extreme climates, and it's known to see the wild boar on the beach being so desperate for water, drinking seawater.
Wow.
So our vineyards are these little paradise islands where they can go and just get nourishment.
And yeah, so Remy from the Gavroche, I think it says. So I have to say the white 2016 works really well with salami, with hazelnuts, and salami with walnuts. The acidity balances the fat of the salami, and the fruits of the wine combine well with the nuttiness.
Fantastic.
Can't wait to get out to restaurants again.
And Chris Galvin of Galvin La Chapelle, he's asked, are they affected by red sand dropped by the...
Good luck.
Scirocco.
Rocco, is it? No, not as far as I'm aware, but Wendy would know better than I would.
It happened about 2 weeks ago. It was absolutely insane. I went outside and my car was absolutely filthy. So it's the sand that gets with the wind from Africa that gets blown over and it just precipitates down in France. I've seen it once since I've been here. Absolutely, absolutely shocking.
And could you just touch on your winemaking as well? I know we talked a lot about the vineyards. I know it's very much a hands-off approach, but kind of what you do in the winery, do you use barrels? Is it tanks? I can see in the picture right now, of course, but
okay, so our whites are direct press. I have a pneumatic press. We'll do the way I reception grapes is because I'm about 30 minutes from the winery and the vineyards. They'll get picked up they'll get picked into T-bins and transported down with a trailer and a pickup, which each is about 300 kgs. So I can reception about 2 tons at a time. Our system is absolutely amazing. We have a forklift that we can rotate. So all the selections done in the vineyards. As soon as the grapes come in, I use sulfur. I'll let that hang for a little bit. And then it goes straight into the pneumatic press. I press and then it goes into a cold tank. I do a cold overnight at about 8 degrees. And then I pump up the clear juice. And slowly the wine starts warming up and hopefully it starts fermenting. If I have a fermenting juice already happening, I'll use that to start up the new juice. I'll take maybe around 30 liters of the fermenting juice just to get it going. But generally, we don't have a problem of fermentation. And of course, there's no stopping or encouraging malolactic. It happens spontaneously. So once the white wine is in tanks and it's fermenting, as soon as it's dry, it goes straight into oak and it stays there until we call it up for blending. For the reds, we do whole grape maceration. That's my preference. I think it does really well with our varietals that we use, so Syrah, Carignan, and Grenache. We're very vigilant. It's not a hands-off time at all for us. We use professional analysis all the time to see how the things are fermenting, how the wines are fermenting. If we've got a malolactic starting, which is a big risk for us, malolactic on grapes, as soon as that happens, we'll separate the juice and we'll press directly, separate as much as we can, and then that would finish fermenting in oak. And so I use 500 liter demi-muid, and we have oak tanks, 20 and 30 hectoliter oak tanks from Stockinger.
And you touched on sulfur just before, so I'm not going to move away from it, but so your thoughts on sulfur and different amounts, how much to use, what are your thoughts on sulfur and also copper in the vineyards as well?
Well, copper, we don't have a choice. We have mildew. We fight against mildew and oedium. There's no alternative yet, unfortunately. And I know that it's a project that's being worked on, but we are limited over 5 years of how much we can, being certified biodynamic. With regards to sulfur, I think that it's important to understand when and how much to use. And for example, I believe that the Soula wine 2016 total now finished in the bottle, we have 23 milligrams per liter. So even though I used sulfur at the beginning on the grapes, which is the most important for me because, as I said, the vineyards are about 30 minutes away. We're picking in the hot sun. It's being transported 30 minutes down in the hot sun. I need to protect what's happening right away. And sulfur is my best solution. Plus, during the fermentation, the sulfur gets eaten up. And at the end of fermentation, usually after analysis, there's 0 sulfur. So once that's in the oak, in the aging part of it, usually I don't add sulfur unless I'm seeing volatile going up. I'll just zip it down with maybe 2 grams per hectoliter. And then I'll do an analysis if the wine needs sulfur before bottling to just stabilize it.
Wendy, we have a question from Lucas Renaud. Very good. Are you using French oak, and are they old?
So we are using French oak and we are using Austrian oak. So French oak is Butte. It's these are all our older oaks, and then I'm a huge fan of Stockinger. It's Austrian. It's like the Rolls Royce of oak. It's not what it doesn't give you vanilla. It doesn't give you toasty, roasty flavors. It just integrates. Like, for example, the 2016 that we're tasting has got 30% new oak of Stockinger, and it's not an element that's overwhelming. It's an integration, and it adds to the complexity.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's delicious.
Yeah, you don't taste it.
So
No, not sure. No, beautifully integrated. And just we're nearing to the end, I'd say. And just one, firstly, Laura Patry from Jason Aston Group. She just mentioned, Remy, that tu nous invites at the Gavroche, and so we all look forward to that.
One thing I've been wanting to say
Yeah.
is that we have found, despite our very southerly situation, that our grapes ripen at, and our current vintages are 12.5 degrees. So our grapes ripen at very low levels of alcohol, of sugar. Therefore, they ferment out to low levels of alcohol. And we put this down, both Gerald, who was with us before Wendy, and now Wendy, we put this down to biodynamics. And we think that with biodynamics, we reach full ripeness with lower sugars, which results in a wine that is fully ripe, but with a lower alcohol level. Therefore, it's much more digestible. In our fairly early days, they had Vinexpo in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And we had a message from a Frenchman who was at the top of one of those Shanghai towers. And he said, I'm entertaining my Chinese clients. I don't like white wine, but in desperation, I saw yours and chose it. And I've served it all to them. And I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Oh.
So you converted me white wine.
And I know, Mark, you often say about the Gavroche as well, but Remy says that we're all welcome when it reopens, and Mark, you're the first.
Well, that's great. Well, the Gavroche have been enormous supporters. We love them very dearly. We miss dear Albert enormously, and goodness me, we just can't wait for them to reopen, and we will be supporting them to the utmost of our ability once they do.
Thanks, Wendy.
thank you,
Thanks,
thank
Mark.
you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Oh, that's a lovely picture.
Lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much. And Mark, is Sue with you?
Yes, she is. She's here.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, Sue. Oh.
Very much.
I'm not right.
Okay, she is. Hi, darling.
Yes.
That was amazing. You had so many people, so many questions.
Oh.
I
We
thought
look
it,
forward
you
to
know,
seeing
it was. I mean, I'm not very familiar with this sort of what's it called? Web zooming. Yes.
We're all down in the Roussillon right now.
But no, congratulations. I mean, I think
Well,
it's
thank you
very
very
because
much.
there is, if the, you know, we're thrilled and people are so interested in Le Soula, and we'll do everything we can to
Make it better.
lots of luck to everybody.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
all so
Thank you.
much. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.